Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining this afternoon. I'm going to get started. So today I'm going to be the webinar moderator. So in the background, I'm going to be answering the live chat and I'm going to be working on the technical side of the webinar. And our hosts today are Juliet and Steve. We're going to be going into a Q&A at the end of the session today. So please feel free to send in any questions throughout the webinar. And towards the end, we'll get round to answering them all. So just to let you all know, your microphones are muted and it is only going to be the hosts who are on camera today. And I will be doing my best to reply to all of your messages as we go along. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Juliet, who's going to be kickstarting the webinar. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Izzy. Hello and welcome to you all, and thank you for attending our webinar, How to Combat a Volatile Working Environment. Next slide, please, Izzy. Okay, so an introduction to your hosts. Your hosts for the next hour will be myself and my colleague, Steve Wood. I'm Juliet Price, the Managing Director of Park City. I founded Park City in 1997, and I've been a leader of an SME for over 25 years. My leadership experience also extends beyond Park City. I was the first female chairman of the Institute of Directors Essex and was a non-executive director for Business Link and Ixion for over 10 years. Steve is Park City's learning and development lead, and he has over 20 years of management experience in the FMG market and 12 years experience in consulting, coaching and training. And with a master's degree in operational excellence and psychology, Steve is very well placed to advise on the subject today. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are the topics we're planning to cover today? Well, what is a volatile working environment, first of all? How did we get here? And we'll talk a bit about what's created this environment. What is the new norm, if indeed there is one? What are Park City's HR team managing? We'll go through some real life examples of the sorts of issues that they're facing. What can be done to combat these issues? Obviously, we're going to cover some solutions as well as some problems today. And what are the real critical management and leadership focus areas? And this is the biggest thing, ideally, that we want you to take away from today, are the actions that you, as leaders and managers, can take away and put into practice in your business tomorrow. Next slide, please, Izzy. As Izzy mentioned, we've got a Q&A, so please feel free to send in or type in any questions that you might have. So this is your opportunity to really gain maximum value from your time today. Please feel free to ask any questions about managing in this volatile environment. If you click on the little speech bubble in the bottom right-hand corner, it's got a little question mark inside it. Type your name and company name, submit your question, and then Izzy will read the question out at the end of the session, and then Steve and I will do our very best to answer as many questions as we can. Next slide, please. So what is a volatile working environment? Well, in the recent 2 years, we've all been through a pandemic, the likes of which none of us have ever experienced before. And since COVID, business leaders are saying these are really challenging times. Organisational cultures are deteriorating. They're struggling to maintain morale and motivation. Employee engagement, retention and culture has been really hard hit. After all, it's tough to nurture a shared set of beliefs and behaviours if people are unmotivated, disengaged or not there. So firstly, what do we mean by volatile? So the dictionary definition of volatile, as I'm sure you already know, is rapid or unexpected change. So our working environments and the people in them are all affected by this volatility. For many SME businesses, 2022, I think you'll all agree, has been a real roller coaster ride. So there was a brief glimpse of post-COVID optimism, which was then flattened immediately Russia invaded the Ukraine in late February. And since then, business confidence has been deflated due to inflationary pressures, the impact the ongoing Ukrainian conflict has had on the global energy markets, continued supply chain problems, staff shortages, and recruitment issues. And then, of course, added to that in the UK, there's been political instability, which led to the turbulence in the financial markets and rising interest rates. Need I go on? Well, businesses also, are facing all of this instability. And, inflation rose really sharply since the restrictions were lifted. It reached double figures this summer. And of course, wages have had to increase to an extent as well. But just to add to the uncertainty, the economy contracted in the last quarter, and all the indicators are that we're in recession. But of course, that hasn't officially been confirmed by the Bank of England. So many businesses and people are describing this environment as volatile. Next slide, please. So what are the top SME concerns, small to medium-sized businesses? What do they say are the issues that they're facing? So in a recent Institute of Directors survey of over 20,000 of their members in September this year, it highlighted the top 5 concerns. The top 2 were economic conditions and energy costs. Mid-table is global economic conditions and skills shortages. And then the trading relationship with the EU. Well, this survey really highlighted these problems when one member said the costs for their business were skyrocketing. Their supply chain in events was decimated through COVID. They'd lost 40% capacity. People were proving hard to replace, and raw materials and energy prices are going up mid-contract. This was forcing them to put their prices up. It's one strategy, isn't it? And recently, anecdotally, one of Park City's clients that has got 6 manufacturing sites across the UK said, our energy bill has gone up overnight from 500,000 to £4 million. I mean, ouch, that's seriously painful. According to this survey, SMEs are still planning for growth, although the outlook is deteriorating, particularly for those most exposed to the rising price of energy, for example, manufacturing, and also those most affected by discretionary spending, for example, perhaps the hospitality sector. Now, the reality is we can't influence any of the economic conditions. We can't change rising energy costs. So let's look at what we can do. Let's focus on what we can do. Next slide, please. So what can we control and influence? Well, these are the things that we can do to combat this volatile working environment, to positively influence our business results. And that is to focus on our people, our management, and our leadership. And we'll explore how HR can help with this, because HR really need to align right now with leadership to understand how this volatile environment is affecting your business. Because obviously, it'll affect different businesses in different ways. So leadership and HR really need to work together with a new focus to address these challenges. In terms of skills shortages and the difficulty recruiting people, there are a number of actions you can take to improve your recruitment results, but more about that later in the webinar. An issue that SMEs and larger companies are still dealing with is kind of the ongoing impact of this working from home, hybrid working models. So let's explore a little bit, perhaps, what works and what doesn't. Next slide, please. So what is the new workplace norm? Well, in this context of working from home and hybrid working, all employers are grappling with this, okay? What can we learn, if anything, from some of the big name employers? How are they managing this problem? So, Google. They recently told staff that they had to work at least 3 days a week in the office now, and therefore staff needed to live nearby. Twitter. I'm sure you've all been reading the publicity about the changes that Elon Musk is making since he acquired Twitter. Just this month, they instructed staff to return to the office and informed them they'd need to work longer hours. Apple, well, they did a U-turn, due, in fact, to pressure imposed on them by their employees. Initially, they said everyone had to return to the office on 3 set days, but the plan now is 2 days minimum in the office. Amazon, again, they also did a U-turn from everyone must return to the office to now a hybrid model. So 3 days in the office and 2 days flexible, perhaps working from home if the employee wishes. And Netflix, the last one on our list there, last but not least, Netflix CEO Reed Hastings said, "We can't see any positives to working from home at all." So hybrid working is still the most popular with these big names, but there are significant differences between their policies. From completely led, the employee chooses how, when, and where they work, to very specific detailed policies where the company dictate when you work from the office. The Bank of England, they had a policy of 1 day a week hybrid, but they abandoned it. Their new governor, Andrew Bailey, said there is a prolific expectation among skilled job seekers that remote working would be part of their employment. So as employers, we're having to accept this as we're recruiting people in the job market where working from home is seen as part of their work-life balance. Well, what can we learn from all of that? Well, what we can learn is that all of this is a volatile situation. It's in flux. And if you're experiencing some of these challenges, just know that you're in good hands. Next slide, please. So is there a new workplace norm? Well, pre-COVID, employment law and best practice was very much supporting flexible working, and that's still the case now, with well-being programs and the need for employers to focus on supporting their people with mental health awareness as well. And the legislation, perhaps, is still weighted towards the employee. And because of COVID, technology advanced 10 years during that time. Businesses set themselves up to support home working. And then sales, marketing, finance, administration, all of these departments could then argue the case that they could do their jobs from home. But these advances in technology are allowing people to be more self-sufficient. And this in itself is creating issues because it's a volatile environment being shaped and changed on a weekly basis. So what we want you to think about today is, this is a big takeaway for you today, plans, initiatives and programs that may have worked for you in your business before may not be working now. Continue to do what you've always done and you won't necessarily get the same results because the world and the people in it have changed. So we need to focus on what we can do, on what are the new arrangements and plans that we can put into our business. So what is the new norm in the workplace right now? Well, there is no new norm. Anything goes. It's a case of what works best for your business, but lots of tips and advice to come. Next slide, please, Izzy. So, what are our clients experiencing? Up on the screen, you can see some examples. These are real life examples. These are some of the issues that our clients have telephoned in about onto our HR helpline, and our HR team are managing these sorts of issues on a daily basis, it seems. So clients are saying they're finding it hard to recruit. Recruitment's really difficult. So why is that the case? Well, in the pandemic, unemployment rates rose, but then that was reversed in 2021 and it hit record lows of 3.6% by the autumn. Vacancies, however, remain much higher than before the pandemic. This is largely because the number of people wanting to work has reduced by around 500,000 people. leading to real recruitment issues, particularly in the retail and the manufacturing sectors. A client discovered an employee was working from their holiday home in France. This is a real case. And the client rang up and said, "Is this okay? What should we do?" That was one for us to manage. We've had helpline calls about employees logging on to Zoom meetings from their bed. This has now become commonly known as working from the soft office. Another case of an employee working from home with small children running around, and the client kind of questioning, well, can they really focus on all parts of their role with small children running around? Pretty tricky. In another case, an employee was found to be working from the airport, but they didn't have any holiday booked. So what were they planning? A number of clients with employees that have been reluctant to return to the office because they bought pets during lockdown and then didn't really want to leave them at home. There's been quite a number of cases of mental health issues. These are on the rise, including employees experiencing anxiety about returning to the office and employees complaining of burnout or feeling like Zoom zombies. And then in some cases, people raising concerns of sort of feelings of isolation from their employer or their work colleagues. And this is leading to issues around culture and employee engagement and communication. Well, we're all dealing with a rising number of grievances as well. In part, this can be potentially due to the re-socialisation of everyone. People re-socialising outside of work, but also back in the confines of the office environment. Another reason is that people's expectations have changed. So what they used to accept, they won't accept now. Poor behaviour being displayed in the workplace. People forgetting, it seems, how to behave and what's acceptable and what isn't. We're also managing disgruntled and discontented people. So this might be a group of people that reevaluated their lives during the past couple of years. And they're now, some of them are leaving the workforce, which has created this so-called Great Resignation. So the CMI, Chartered Management Institute, confirms that more people leave their jobs due to their boss than any other reason. So we really do need to think about and focus on training here, but we'll talk some more about that later on. We've also managed cases where employees have reevaluated their lives during lockdown, returned to work, but they're now kind of working to rule. They're sort of physically there, but they're not there mentally. They've switched off. And this is now called quiet quitting. So we've got clients ringing in, talking to us about how can we manage this, and performance managing these employees. So what might be causing some of these issues? Next slide, please. Well, a national survey recently highlighted that staff, in some cases, are choosing to work from home to avoid issues in the workplace. These are some behaviours witnessed at work. So some of these behaviours: bullying, homophobic behaviour, offensive comments, even sexual harassment. So the desire to work from home is not always driven by the obvious kind of saving money and time not doing the daily commute. Toxic workplaces, unfortunately, are on the rise. Recent data from Instaprint shows that 70% of workers believe they've worked in a toxic company culture. That's scary, isn't it? 70%. Toxic cultures have a devastating effect on worker health and well-being. 36% of people are more likely to have anxiety, 32% are more likely to have panic attacks, and 27% more likely to have depression. A toxic work culture is 10.4 times more likely to contribute to an employee quitting. As we know, this Great Resignation is really causing HR problems, and the costs are going up of constant recruitment and onboarding. So it's really worth taking a temperature check in your business to see what your culture's like, what people think it's like to work for you. Is it a toxic one? Are there some issues that we need to be managing and dealing with? Next slide, please. So, the 5 factors that contribute to a toxic work culture. In a review by Glassdoor, 1.4 million people were reviewed across 600 major companies. These employees described a toxic workplace in 5 main ways, saying that they were non-inclusive, disrespectful, unethical, cutthroat, and even abusive. So, just 5 issues. We need to deal with this. But what's a positive workplace culture? What's a good company culture? Well, good company culture is often confused with how the early tech giants dressed up their offices with pool tables, beer fridges, and beanbags. This kind of stuff, it might be a tiny part of creating a good culture, but culture is more about how employees behave in really critical situations in particular. So great company culture is when the majority of employees and their managers can deal with pressure and respond creatively and positively to challenges that they're facing, all while treating each other, their customers, and their co-workers with respect, integrity, and equal dignity. Next slide, please. So, in summary then, I've defined what a volatile working environment is, what we're all dealing with now. We've explored what has created and led to this, how people's expectations have changed, and that's really key, and we'll come on to some more about that. How pre, during, and post-COVID, this has created a situation where now there is no norm any longer. This volatile situation is the norm. We all have to accept that there are elements that have contributed to this volatility, a number of which we can't change. So we have to focus on the critical management and leadership areas that we can affect, and particularly how we can apply some of the principles that you'll hear today to engage with our people in this volatile environment. And I'd now like to hand over to Steve, who's going to explore some of this in how we can engage with our people in this volatile environment. Thanks, Steve. Next one, please.
Thank you, Juliet. Thank you very much for painting such a good picture of the volatile times that we're in. It can be quite scary when you start to sort of look at some of those sort of facts and figures and things, and some of the surveys are around. But I'm here today really to sort of speak to people about getting back to basics, really. And I think that's a good message to sort of take away. I think in volatile times, it's sometimes a natural reaction to react with a somewhat survival instinct. I think in volatile times, I think people are often the first ones to suffer. I think it's a natural reaction when companies and managers are facing all of the pressures that you've so nicely explained in the last sort of 20 minutes. I think it's the natural reaction is to hunker down or bunker down and cut costs. And unfortunately, people are normally at the painful end of that, whether it's training, development, opportunities, or actual just hours being able to earn a living. People are often the ones that really sort of bear the brunt in these volatile times. And that reaction is understandable. However, there's a lot to be said for maybe the opposite approach being more effective. History is littered with examples of companies who have spent years and years building positive cultures, and they've built resilient cultures. They've built cultures where people are agile and people have creativity and passion. And it's often these cultures, especially the ones that have managed to sort of harvest this family type of culture, that have shown that they can get through these volatile changing times. Even recently, companies like Netflix, Adobe, Lego, and even in the past, Toyota, they've all had proven great cultures and have gone through really tough times, changed and adapted, and have come out bigger and stronger. So that's going to be very much the focus of what we talk about today. One of the terms that has been mentioned more than once is employee engagement, and it's one of those terms that gets thrown around all the time, and I think it's largely misunderstood. I think lots of things get banded, oh, it's employee engagement, or we need to work on employee engagement, but actually, as Juliet alluded to, it's not beanbags, it's not coffee machines, it's not free food and all that kind of thing. The secret and the key part of the term employee engagement is the word engage. And whilst that's beautifully simple, that can sometimes be quite tough for managers. So how do you engage with your team? How do you engage with your staff? I feel silly almost saying it, but it is beautifully simple. You need to speak to your people. You need to spend time with your teams. Get to know them on an almost personal level. It doesn't. It really annoys me when managers say, "Oh, but I'm their manager. I have to act a certain way." It's absolute rubbish. You have to form relationships with people. And the key to forming all relationships is trust. Now, you don't get to build trust unless you actually open up, show that you're a human being, and speak to someone on equal terms. That's the way to build trust. So what I mean by engage, there's no shortcut to it. You have to spend time with your people. So let's move on to talk a little bit more about trust. One of the nicest people that have written about trust is Stephen Covey, both in his book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and also he wrote a book actually dedicated to trust called The Speed of Trust. And he uses the model you can see on your screens here. It's an oak tree, and obviously the analogy there is that trust can take a long time to build, and the most important part arguably is the roots. So he splits it into two factors here. So you've got character and competence. What's meant by character is integrity and intent. These are your values, your beliefs, they're your ethics. It's the behavior, it's who you are. It's the fundamental aspects of what defines you as a person. It's what you do when people aren't looking, if you like. And why this is important is if you're in a position in your organization, in your role, where you can be yourself, that's hugely powerful in forming these trustful relationships, because it gives you something called authenticity. When you are allowed to be yourself, people then see that and they will naturally gravitate towards you and trust you. The opposite is true if you are having to try and be someone that you're not, or having to act in a way that you're not, because then people see through that also very, very quickly. And if you're not behaving in an authentic manner, it's actually really, really difficult to trust somebody. The opposite is actually true. The other half of the model is what Covey refers to as competence. Now, competence is capability and results. You need to be able to do what you have said you're going to do. So therefore, how that comes out in terms of management is that we need to ensure that our people are able to do their jobs. We need to ensure that we're training them, developing them, coaching them, getting them to be their best version of themselves. And then when that competence is there, it's much easier to trust someone. It's much easier to delegate to someone, empower someone. And obviously, if you do that, you will enjoy great results. So the reason I like Covey's model is it fits nicely in with a lot of the leadership models that we talk about, especially on our CMI courses that we run with Park City. And one of the most basic ones is you can either choose to be a transactional manager or a transformational manager. Now, in times of volatility, I think it's easier to become a transactional manager. Let's do things by the book. Let's follow the procedures. Let's cut costs. Let's do everything on paper and look at the numbers. But if you treat your people in a transactional manner, you're only going to get a transaction in return. So the way that looks in terms of behavior is that people will wake up in the morning and they'll go to work, they'll do their hours, but that's it. So you might get 80% out of people. I personally believe everybody comes to work to do a good job, so that might be enough for you. I'm not saying any of these approaches is right or wrong, But if you act in a transactional manner, you're only going to get transactional behavior from your staff. Now, the other way is to become a transformational leader. So these are leaders who really do invest time into their relationships. They build relationships. Their teams like them and trust them. And if you're a transformational manager, you can get more out of your staff. You'll get the 100% out of your staff. Your staff will actually want to do a good job for you. They'll want the company to succeed. They'll want the company to do well. So the sort of behaviors you'll see are people coming in early in the morning, people taking ideas home and working on stuff out of hours because they want to, because they trust you. So let's just have a quick step back and have a look at some key learnings and takeaways that I think people can actually go away and start to implement straight away. There really is no sort of shortcut to it, but you have to get to know your staff. You have to start to build trust, develop them, obviously train them and build their potential and build their experience and confidence, because then you can delegate. And when you can delegate, they feel empowered. And again, all of these things will impact your culture. So, I mean, some sort of simple things which the audience today might already do, but I've seen an awful lot of companies that just don't do this, is that you can actually start to systemize ways to measure engagement and relationship building. So many of the top companies in the world now make some of their leaders interact with their staff on a daily basis as part of their standard work. It's part of their standard work in practice. Some companies are even measured on it. Like, how many chats have you had today? How many hours have you spent out on the shop floor speaking to the people? And obviously you can build that sort of capability into PDRs and KPIs and that kind of thing. So the message here really to take away is that in volatile times, treating your staff like human beings can have an absolutely profound effect. Remember, as managers and organizations, if we're feeling nervous and unsettled in volatile times, so are our staff. So if we can fight the urge to just become transactional and become more humane, our staff will pay us back in droves. That's the takeaway on that slide. And the trust model fits really nicely into motivation theory. This particular model is by Daniel Pink. And Daniel Pink has shown over thousands and thousands of experiments all across the world. There's been other multiple studies that have shown the same results, that money is only a motivator under certain conditions. I can almost hear a sort of collective groan from everyone listening today thinking, well, money motivates me. You're not wrong, it does. Money motivates everybody. But money only motivates you up to a point where you have enough to survive on. Once you are comfortable, and again, I can hear people saying, well, they're never comfortable, and I get you, but once you have enough money to survive on and pay your bills, then that sort of survival instinct is replaced by other factors. Okay. And again, those of you that have been on the CMI course will know that this links really nicely into Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Once your survival motivators are met, other things replace them. So that idea of a monetary reward or the opposite of that, some sort of punishment, that really only works for certain tasks and certain jobs. In fact, it's been shown that it only works in really non-cognitive, rudimentary, basic tasks. If that's the type of work you do, then actually maybe that type of reward will work. But if you require your staff to think, if you require your staff to have some creativity, if you want them to be agile, then there are much more powerful factors which can affect motivation than simply money. And those are the three that you can see on your screen here. So purpose, mastery, and autonomy. Let's look at these individually. Purpose is the desire to be something bigger than ourselves, to take part in something bigger than ourselves. And that is, why does your organization exist? If you can get your staff to really latch on to what your organization is trying to achieve, what's the why, then people will really actually enjoy being part of that movement. It might give them enough of a reason to get out of bed in the morning. Mastery is a really obvious one, I think, and it's based on the principle that actually human beings love to improve. Human beings love to be good at stuff. So again, we have to make sure that we have the capability and the systems in place to develop our people. How do we develop our people's skills? How do we give them new experiences? Give them the opportunity to feel like they matter. Give them the opportunity to master a skill and be good at something. And that leads us on to the final one, which is autonomy. And again, it's pretty self-explanatory, really, but human beings really like to feel somehow in control of their own destiny to a certain degree. So from a leader's perspective here, we have to trust our teams. We have to sometimes get out of their way. I see too many managers like wanting to control almost every aspect of what their teams do. Once your team has, or your individuals have got enough skill, they've got enough experience, and they've got enough confidence, we have to get out of their way and let them do their job. Again, anyone here who's been micromanaged and not allowed to do that will know how sort of demoralizing and really unmotivating that is. I actually don't think it's sustainable. I think after maybe months or years of living of working under those conditions, people will leave their jobs. So where possible, empower, train, empower, and then delegate to your staff. And I think that leads quite nicely into the whole work from home discussion. So I have some quite strong beliefs on working from home, and they come back to the basic principles of leadership, really. And that is, if your staff, if you had a relationship with someone before COVID that didn't work from home, and you completely trusted them to do their job, you had a good relationship with them, the levels of trust were really high, they constantly performed to a good standard, there is no reason why that person should not do exactly the same working from home. However, those kind of relationships take time to build, so it's unlikely that you have that type of relationship with every single person in your team. So for me, when people argue about working from home, I think you've got to go back to the real basics there of like, what's your relationship like with them? If the levels of trust are high, there's no reason why it shouldn't work. Anyway, again, that leads us quite nicely on to talk about a leadership model. And the one I've chosen is Hersey Blanchard's situational leadership model, except I've adapted it slightly because coaching is now sort of changed very much from the understanding that was there when they wrote the original model in 1982, I think. So the reason I like this model is because it shows that there are different leadership styles. But it also demonstrates a pathway. So the red line you can see through the middle in the curve, that's a pathway that I think all leaders should be attempting to take their staff on. So you can see in the bottom right quadrant there's a directing leadership style. Unfortunately, again, in volatile times, this is the almost like the default management style where people start telling people what to do. I'm not saying there's not a time and place for that. There absolutely is. When people haven't got high confidence levels, high skill levels, or necessary experience, they need direction. So that's fine. But the natural sort of pathway here shows that as those people gain experience, confidence, and skills, you should step back as a leader. You should step back to a more supportive role. And obviously, when they reach their sort of top of their skill levels and they've built some nice experience there, your job as a leader is no longer to watch what they're doing, check what they're doing, it's to help them reach their potential. And so that's where coaching comes in. Coaching's a fantastic form of communication and training and development to get your people to become the best they can be. And obviously, if they do that, then they will fall into that bottom left segment there, which is delegating. So that's now a position where you fully trust someone and you can give them whole chunks of your everyday management tasks to help you in your job. And guess what? The more delegating you do, the more empowerment you do, the more time you have for things like leadership and having good conversations and building that trust with your staff. So I think the message here really is that actually you can change your style, and it's okay to change your style depending on the individual. Again, I get really annoyed when I hear managers say, I've got to treat everyone exactly the same. It's absolute rubbish. Yes, you've got to treat everyone the same within the confines of the policies and the procedures and the regulations. However, you're in terms of developmental relationships, everybody should be treated differently depending on the situation and the individual. So let's just review the takeaways up to this point. It's really important that you give your staff a reason to get out of bed in the morning. So share with them your vision, get them involved in setting a vision if you can. Embed learning and development into everything you do. In my view, I know I work in L&D, so I'm passionate about it, but it should be the last thing in companies cut. Some of the simple things to do there is create skills matrices. Make sure that every job is broken up into the individual skilled elements so that you can train it and replicate it time and time again. Use those matrices for progression planning, so your staff know that they're on a journey and that they can always improve and they can always progress. Make sure you've got ways of capturing best practice and standardizing good practice. And obviously, the recurring thing through all of this is you have to work really hard on building those relationships. Now, the marvelous thing about all of this is that it will all affect your culture. So culture is it's one of those, another thing that's talked about an awful lot, often not really fully understood. And culture is never ever set in a boardroom. Culture is never ever set by a bunch of senior execs in an office. Culture is the way it feels when you walk into a place in the morning. Culture is the type of language that people use. Culture is very much the feeling of a workplace. And as Peter Drucker says there, it's my favorite quote, culture will eat strategy for breakfast every single time. So I know a lot of the stuff I've said today, we've got a very limited time, sounds like I'm making light of it or making it sound easy. It's really not easy, but it's probably the right thing to do. Obviously, it's always better if this is driven from the top down, but any single person here who's attending today can start to take steps tomorrow to improve their culture. And with that, I will pass you over to Juliet, who will summarize some of the things we've spoke about today.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Well, I think what you've heard from Steve, some of the takeaways there are that the really, really successful businesses manage to create a culture of resilience, creativity, and passion. So all of their people within the business have that resilience and are able to work creatively and be really passionate about your business purpose. So let's just look at some of the things that leaders and managers can do, things that you can take away today and start to work on and implement in your business. So first of all, look at your business purpose, as we've talked about. Why are you here? What's the real essence, the real magic? Why do you do what you do? Clearly define your purpose and communicate it. Make sure that leaders and HR are both aligned and united in their focus on building and improving relationships with your people. You know, as Steve said, make it a part of your everyday to talk to your people and really listen, really get to know them. And as Tom Peters calls it, he's the presenter and writer, author, and consultant, management by walkabout, MBWA. And if that's done really well and consistently, this will build trust and build relationships with your people in your business. Also, review with your people the values and behaviours that you want in your business. Clearly define them, write them down, communicate them everywhere, make sure that they're aligned with your purpose, and check that all your people are really on board with this and everyone begins behaving accordingly. Involve HR in everything that you do, not just the problems. You know, we're here for the proactive stuff too. You know, you'll gain maximum results with your people that way. Deal with matters as they arise. So if you have a concern that something isn't right, take action. Don't let molehills become mountains, you know, as they can often turn into complex grievances or, you know, ultimately tribunal claims. When recruiting, you need to become marketing experts. Yes, I did just say that. Us HR people need to suddenly become HR experts, marketing experts. We need to do this because we need to build your employer brand. So really think about, what's your employer brand? And this would be, what is it like to work for you? What's it like to work there? Link it back to your purpose. And is your employer brand compelling enough that people will want to be in your team or tribe? And if it isn't, let's rewrite it. But use social media as well. That's a great way to build your employer brand. Not by promoting what you do, but by promoting what it's like to work for you, to work in your business. Promote what's attractive about working for you, what the benefits are, the great culture that you've got, the employee experience, and all of that. If all of that's positive, people will want to join you naturally. Build your employee ratings as an employer on social platforms like Google and Glassdoor. You have to do that proactively. It won't just happen on its own. And review your benefits and rewards policy. Is it encouraging everyone? Is it encouraging everyone in your business to really pull in the same direction as a team? And check that it's encouraging the right behaviours, the sort of behaviours that you want. And make sure that you include an employee assistance program and wellbeing support. Don't worry, these sorts of things don't need to be costly. They don't cost a lot of money. Make sure that managers and leaders regularly give employees positive recognition for work well done, or for demonstrating the behaviours that you want to encourage. Making sure that that becomes part of your MBWA, your management by walkabout strategy, and make sure it's inclusive for everyone, and that the managers aren't just going round and only talking to the 3 people that they're comfortable with. They need to talk to everyone when they do their walkabout. This will really build trust, it'll really build motivation, and it'll build morale, and it'll make you as an employer sticky. People will want to stay. Another thing that'll make you sticky is training and developing your managers to become better managers. In this volatile environment, what we used to train, now it's different. We have to train managers with new skills that they need to manage in this environment. New communication skills, new and better ways to engage with your people. And actually developing your managers is ultimately a win-win, a total win-win, because you'll retain the manager and the team that report to them. Really important. Perhaps consider a staff survey. Again, these don't cost a lot of money. This can assess your company culture. So it's like a dipstick, like you do in the car with the oil. Apparently, this will really assess your company culture, your engagement and employee experience. Check out how your people really feel, not how you think they feel. We need to find out from them what they say. Take action to address any concerns. Train your people in equality, diversity and inclusion, and make sure that behaviours change. This will prevent grievances and some of the toxic cultures that we talked about earlier. Perhaps start a focus group to initiate the changes that you want. This will get everyone on board with it. Culture, as Steve rightly said, isn't set in the boardroom. It's not about us as leaders and just our behaviours. It's about getting everybody on board. Culture is on the shop floor and out in your workplace, in the office. Have a think about all of these actions. I know that Steve and I have put a lot your way. But really think about some of these takeaways today. Build your own strategy of what you think from these ideas and recommendations that we've put forward, or key actions, and put them together in your own strategy. Because above all, do something, take action. Okay. All right, next slide, please. I think we are moving on to our live Q&A. Okay.
Thank you, Juliet. So we've had a couple of questions already being sent in throughout the webinar, but feel free to kind of send in kind of anything that you want to ask both Juliet and Steve, and they'll jump on and answer now. So I'm going to kick off with the first question that we've had from Emma, and she's asked, if you trust your employees and they're continuing to be productive and meeting objectives, do I need to worry about where they're working from?
Okay, it's a good question. Thank you very much, Emma. So I'll give you a leadership answer, and then Juliet can give you a much more robust HR and legal answer. That's a great question in the fact that you've said if you trust your employees and they're still being productive. So the answer is really no. You've obviously, if you trust your employees, you've spent time already building up that relationship. You know what good performance from them looks like, and if they're still doing that, and as long as your business allows for it, so in other words, you don't need them to be, within a certain geographical area, then absolutely not. All I would say on that is that you have to work harder with remote workers to keep that trustful relationship going. So as a manager, you might have to spend more time checking in and communicating with them, as regularly as possible. Juliet?
Yeah, I think, exactly as Steve has said, obviously as an employer, you do, I am going to give some of the HR answer. You've got a duty of care for your people, Emma. So from that perspective, ideally checking in with them on a regular basis, obviously wherever they're working from, you do need to be doing a DSE assessment. So that's something they can self-assess. It's very straightforward. Obviously that's for their display screen equipment, making sure that they're working, in a way that's not going to cause them back, neck and shoulder problems. So things like that you do need to be wary of. But absolutely, if you trust them, it's really about managing performance, rather than time and attendance, really. If we can move to that, it's a great trusted culture, isn't it?
Oh, brilliant. Thank you both. We've had another question saying we've had a policy for working from home, but not all departments are following it. Not all managers are implementing it in the same way. How can I get consistency to avoid being accused of discrimination?
Do you want to take that one, Juliet? It's got policy. It's got policy written in the question.
Yeah, obviously, ideally what we do want, we do advise our clients to have is a working from home or a hybrid working policy. There's a pack that we can send you so that you can, we can help you work through what roles are suitable for hybrid and what roles aren't, and from that perspective, just making sure that, you are applying the policy consistently. And if managers aren't, then it's a case of having a chat with those managers and saying, look, these are the reasons why we've got the policy. This is what the policy means. Maybe they weren't aware. Maybe they didn't understand, the importance of consistency, and just making sure that sort of their application of the policy, the way it's being applied is consistent. But having said that, different departments may well have different rules. That's okay. We can have some rules suitable, some departments suitable for hybrid, and clearly manufacturing production lines and retail aren't, are they? Because you've got to be physically there for the customers. So that's an obvious one that we can work through with managers, but it's definitely a communication one, that one, making sure managers understand, the importance of the policy.
Can I just add to that? I would just say absolutely perfect, the fact that different departments will have different requirements. I've worked with quite a few companies recently where staff almost feel like they're entitled to work from home, or it's something which they just should have. And there's a lot of comparison with other departments. And reiterate back to what we're saying, like the trust has to be there in the first place. But also I think it's important to remember that, most of our organizations, they're not charities. We're not there to just make people's lives happier and better. It's part of it. So I would always try and consider things from like, what's the organization's perspective? So what's the organization trying to achieve? Yes, of course, we have to consider the people as well and how it impacts them. But also, maybe most importantly, it's the customer. So only I think when you can answer and give a good firm nod to all three aspects. Yes, it's the right thing for the company. Yes, it's the right thing for the individual. And yes, it's the right thing for our customers. Only then really you should be considering working from home. Otherwise, it will be, some sort of hybrid or other model. Anyway, thank you for that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steve. Izzy, next question.
Of course. So we've had another question coming in saying, is it common that organisations will have more than one culture? How do you align different departments with what seems to be different aspirations or strategy? Ultimately, do you want to transitional or holistic culture, or do multi-cultures work?
Again, another great question. I know it says Polly there, but I think it was Mark who's logged in on behalf of Polly. But great question. It's not a black and white answer to this one. Yes, sort of holistic or multicultural approach can work. The only thing I would say on that is that if you're trying to adopt change within your organization, if you've got lots and lots of different cultures within an organization, then the rate of that change can be slowed down as a result of it. It's much better and much more effective if everybody is singing from the same song sheet. And so really that does have to come from the top. And in terms, when I say come from the top, they have to drive it and facilitate it, but they should involve as many people as possible in setting a vision for the organization. What is it we are trying to achieve? What is it? What's the purpose? Why do we exist as a company? If you start with that and everybody can get on board with that, then the strategy, everything you do, the strategy, your monthly, 6 monthly, annual, all your objectives should then be linked to that, achieving that vision. And when you get that across a whole organization, that can be extremely powerful at creating quick change and quick results.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think what we're saying there is you sort of almost want an overriding, if you've got multicultural departments, if you like, an overriding culture is really, really what you need to embrace there, I think.
Brilliant. Thank you both. And we've had another question come through asking, can we say to one team they cannot work from home if their jobs are front-facing roles?
Yes, absolutely. And again, this comes down to communication. So, Deborah, I think that is, it'd be great to engage with you on this one because it's quite a long answer to it. I'll try and summarize, but effectively, yes, you can, of course. Clearly, if one department is client facing and, physically the customers are there, they need to physically be there, then that's obvious and easy to explain. In other departments, it may be a different arrangement. So what we need to do is go through a bit of a process just to assess the roles for hybrid working or home working, and then share with the employees the results, get their buy-in so that everybody understands what the situation is. Because if you don't go through that process, what we've seen happening in organisations is that there can be conflict, frustration among employees. Well, why are they being treated differently to us? And that's not fair. They get to work from home on a Friday, or whatever it is. So to avoid all of that, really, really great communication and engagement with your people up front. It's a simple process for managers to go through. It really will save an awful lot of that nonsense.
Brilliant. Thanks, Julia. And I think we have enough time for a couple more questions. So I've got some here. So it says, I want to offer new staff better terms and benefits to attract staff. I know this will create an issue. Can I offer this and avoid the problem?
Yeah. Shall I go first, Steve?
Yeah.
Okay, so ideally, from the employment law answer to this is, we don't want people being offered different terms and conditions because, all that will do is the new people will come in. People, even if you ask them not to share, will tend to share with other people, what their terms and conditions are. And all it does is lead to, potential claims, frustrations, grievances, so on and so on. Obviously, there will be different terms within your business, within the contract of employment. People are on different pay rates, people will be on different hours of work, etc. So we can have different terms and conditions, but I think what the person asking the question is asking is, can I bring new people in on better, more advantageous arrangements? And obviously all that's going to do is upset and frustrate your existing people, perhaps some of whom have worked for you for years, and certainly you may not want them to leave as a result or claim, discrimination. As we all know, that's, not somewhere we want to go. But yeah, so from that perspective, maybe it'd be useful to get in touch with us. I'd like to understand a bit more from that person, what it is they're looking to achieve, because I'm sure I can come up with another solution for you, that might be a better way around things.
And I'll just add to that. Again, you sort of pointed out anyway, Juliet, is the communication there is key. If that's something you have to do, the person asking the questions already sort of correctly identified that this could cause an issue. So if they know it's going to cause an issue, they need to speak to their staff. Again, if they've got a culture there where people care about the organisation, people will understand the reason why certain actions are having to be taken. But if you can involve them in becoming part of the solution, I'm sure there's lots of creative ways of equaling up those pays, benefits, whatever it was they were talking about.
Yeah, we can come up with lots of creative ways for you there. So definitely, please get in touch. I'm happy to, have a call with you on that matter. Izzy, if you can grab the contact details for that person, perhaps we can contact them after the webinar.
Yeah, of course. And I think that's all we've got time for today. So Julia, I'll pass back over to you to kind of finish off.
Awesome. Thank you, Izzy, very much. Thanks, Steve. Brilliant, as always, presenting and answering lots of tricky questions. And thank you to all of you for attending. We hope that you found the session today valuable. We have recorded the webinar, so we will be sending that out for you to watch again. Or for those that obviously were unable to make it today, for them to watch this evening instead of EastEnders. I don't even know if that's on, is it tonight? Anyway, we've also prepared a PDF with some advice and guidance in it, which we will be sending out on some of the key management and leadership actions. So more follow-up, from us on this. As we said before, this is our first webinar in a series. So we will be following up with another session in the new year. But if today has struck a chord with you and you'd like further support, please don't hesitate to get in touch. We're here to help. So never alone, stronger together. Thanks ever so much, everyone. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.